You think Polish grandmothers spent Sundays knitting and sipping weak tea? Think again. These babchis turned tiny kitchens, often no bigger than a modern walk-in closet, into cathedrals of flavor that fed entire families, neighbors, and half the parish after Mass. From cauldrons of fermented soup that could wake the dead to poppy seed rolls so rich they started arguments over the last slice. These aren't fairy tales from some misty old country. These are the real dishes that generations of Polish families devoured every single Sunday, whether they lived in a village hut, a Warsaw tenement, or a displaced persons camp in England. Let's walk back into those flour-dusted, lard-scented kitchens and uncover 20 forgotten recipes your babci probably made the week you were born. 1. Bigos, hunter's stew. It looked like someone threw the entire pantry into one pot, and that was the entire point. Bigos was the immortal stew that never died. Grandma started it on Wednesday or Thursday in the biggest enamel pot she owned. Shredded fresh cabbage mixed with barrels of homemade sauerkraut, pork ribs, smoked bacon, leftover roast, at least 3 kinds of kielbasa, dried wild mushrooms she gathered herself in September and strung above the stove like brown rosaries, dried plums, apples, a whole onion studded with cloves, a handful of juniper berries she'd been hoarding since 1947, caraway bay leaves, allspice, and, if the priest wasn't visiting, a generous glug of red wine or leftover beer from Uncle's bottle. The pot lived on the back burner for days, burping and bubbling, getting stirred every time someone walked past the stove to hang up a coat. Each reheating made it darker, thicker, more mysterious. By Sunday it was so concentrated, the wooden spoon stood at attention like a soldier. Served with thick slices of rye bread still warm from the bakery downstairs, one bowl could knock a grown man into a 3-hour nap. Monday's reheated leftovers were fought over like gold bars. Some babchis bragged their Bigos was old enough to have its own birth certificate and still tasted better than anything you'll ever eat in a restaurant. 2. Gołąbki stuffed cabbage rolls. Before anyone cared about low carb, Polish grandmas were wrapping little pigeons. Early Sunday morning, she'd be standing over a pot the size of a washtub, blanching whole heads of cabbage until the leaves went limp and obedient. Out came the biggest leaves, veins shaved flat with a knife older than the Republic. The filling was half ground pork shoulder, half beef, cooked rice, onions fried golden in lard, a fistful of dried marjoram, salt, and enough black pepper to make you cough twice. Each leaf got a generous scoop, folded like an envelope, sides tucked in, rolled tight so nothing dared escape. They were packed shoulder to shoulder in a deep roasting pan, drowned in tomato sauce made from last summer's jars, and sweetened with a secret grated carrot that nobody was supposed to notice. 4 slow hours in the oven, and the entire apartment block knew Sunday dinner was coming. The smell crawled under doors and down stairwells. They emerged soft, juicy, swimming in sauce you mopped up with bread until the plate looked clean enough to put back in the cabinet. The burnt one stuck to the bottom of the pan. That crispy, tomato caramelized prize went to whoever helped peel the cabbage the night before. 3. Żurek, sour rye soup. Some called it hangover medicine. Others called it liquid sourdough. Every babci kept a sacred mason jar of zakwas fermenting on the warmest windowsill, rye flour, water, garlic cloves, a heel of rye bread, and sometimes a bay leaf left to bubble and stink up the kitchen for a week. By Thursday, it smelled like a barn, and a bakery had a baby, and that was perfect. Sunday morning, she poured that sour gold into the pot with chunks of smoked pork ribs, white kielbasa fresh from the butcher, diced potatoes, a spoonful of horseradish that cleared your sinuses and your sins, marjoram, and a bay leaf or 3. Right before serving, she slid in halves of hard-boiled eggs, so the yolks smiled up at you, and a snowfall of fresh dill. The broth was creamy, tangy, smoky, and so thick the spoon stood up straight. If it didn't, Grandma sent you back to stir harder. Served in deep bowls with rye bread on the side, this was the soul of Polish Sunday. Sour enough to remind you life isn't always sweet, hearty enough to carry you through another week of work or war. 4. Pierogi z kapustą I grzybami. Sauerkraut and mushroom dumplings. The kitchen table became a factory the moment the rosary ended Saturday night. One aunt rolled dough until her shoulders screamed, another rinsed and chopped homemade sauerkraut, someone else soaked dried boletus and porcini mushrooms until the whole house smelled like a pine forest in December. Onions were fried in lard until sweet and golden, mixed with the drained mushrooms and sauerkraut. seasoned with pepper and a whisper of caraway. Circles cut with an upside-down glass, a spoonful of filling in the middle, edges crimped with a fork, or, if you were lucky, Grandma's pinky nail that left a signature wavy pattern only her pierogi had. Dropped by the dozen into a cauldron of salted boiling water until they floated like little life rafts, then fried in fresh butter and more onions until the edges turned lacy and crisp. You ate them straight from the cast iron pan, with a dollop of sour cream so thick it needed its own spoon. The fight for the last pierog was an Olympic event. Grandma always pretended there was one more hiding under the napkin for the grandchild who helped clean up. 5. Kiszka, blood sausage. You won't find this on any hipster charcuterie board today, but when the pig was slaughtered in late November, babci turned every drop of blood into gold. The still warm blood was caught in a bucket, whisked with barley groats or buckwheat, diced pork fat, onions fried until they collapsed, heavy doses of marjoram, black pepper, and sometimes a pinch of cloves. The mixture was seasoned so boldly that even the pickiest kid forgot what it was made of. Then came the stuffing. Natural casings rinsed a dozen times, filled with a funnel and a steady hand, tied off with twine into fat links that looked like dark red pythons. Gently poached in barely simmering water so they wouldn't burst, then hung in the cold pantry to firm up. Come Sunday, thick slices hit the cast iron skillet and sizzled until the casing snapped like tiny firecrackers and the edges curled crisp. Served piping hot with mustard sharp enough to wake the ancestors and a heap of sauerkraut to cut the richness. You either grew up loving Kiszka and fighting your cousins for the crunchy end pieces, or you spent your childhood hiding under the table pretending you were suddenly vegetarian. Grandma didn't care. She'd been eating it since the war when meat was a rumor and blood was free. One bite, and you understood why nothing, absolutely nothing, was ever wasted in her kitchen. 6. Makowiec, poppy seed roll. Before anyone had electric grinders, babci spent an entire afternoon bolted to the kitchen table with a hand-crank poppy seed grinder that looked like medieval torture equipment. Half a kilo of blue-black seeds went in, silky, oily paste came out, perfuming the whole flat with an addictive nutty sweetness. She mixed it with honey from the neighbor's bees, raisins soaked in black tea, chopped walnuts, candied orange peel, and, if Uncle was out smoking on the balcony, a solid splash of rum for depth. The yeast dough was kneaded until it shone, rested under an embroidered cloth until doubled, then rolled so thin you could read the newspaper headlines through it. Fillings spread edge to edge, rolled up like a carpet, ends tucked, brushed with egg wash, and baked until the top cracked open like parched earth. When it came out of the oven, the whole stairwell smelled like Christmas in July. Sliced thick on her best plate, it stained your fingers and tongue gray-blue for hours. One roll fed the family for days of tea-time slices, except it never lasted past Tuesday because someone was always sneaking midnight pieces with a glass of cold milk. 7. Barszcz czerwony z uszkami, clear beet soup with tiny mushroom dumplings. This was the royal one, the soup that only appeared on Christmas Eve and the most special Sundays. Beets were peeled, sliced, and set to ferment in an earthenware crock with garlic and warm water for a week until the kvass turned the color of royal rubies. Strained crystal clear, seasoned with a whisper of marjoram and a bay leaf, then brought to a gentle simmer. Meanwhile, the real magic, Uszka, little ears. Tinier than regular pierogi, filled with wild mushrooms and onions minced so fine they disappeared into velvet. Folding 50 or 100 of these microscopic dumplings took the patience of a saint and the eyesight of a hawk. Grandkids were banned from helping because one sneeze could ruin the batch. Served piping hot in delicate china cups, the crimson broth so pure you could see the pattern on the bottom, each spoonful carrying 1 or 2 perfect Uszka. One slurp and the whole table fell silent because this wasn't just soup, it was centuries of survival, elegance, and stubborn hope poured into a bowl. 8. Kluski Śląskie, Silesian dumplings. In the coal-blackened towns of Silesia, these potato dumplings were law. Babci boiled yesterday's potatoes, mashed them smooth while still hot, mixed in potato starch and 1 egg, then formed perfect golf ball-sized rounds. The sacred rule, every single dumpling had to have a deep thumbprint crater in the center. If the hole closed while boiling, You were banned from the kitchen until next Easter. Dropped into salted water, they floated to the surface like little white lifeboats, then got rolled in melted butter and golden bacon cracklings until every crater overflowed with pork-scented glory. Served alongside roast pork or gooey mushroom sauce, they were edible gravy sponges that turned simple Sunday dinner into a feast. Get the whole wrong, and you'd hear about it for the rest of your life, because in Silesia, a closed Kluski was basically a sin. Dziewiąty Kapuśniak, sauerkraut soup with ribs. When winter bit hard and the snow reached the windows, Kapuśniak was the answer. Smoked pork ribs went into the pot first, then a flood of sauerkraut juice sharp enough to etch glass, diced potatoes, carrots, a whole smoked kielbasa for good measure, dill, bay leaves, and a handful of dried mushrooms for depth. Simmered until the broth turned golden and the meat fell off the bone with a sigh. Thick, tangy, smoky, and so rich it coated the spoon. Babci always tasted it with a wooden spoon she'd been using since 1956 and declared it almost ready 3 times before it actually was. Served in deep bowls with rye bread for dunking, and if you were the youngest grandchild, you'd magically find the biggest, meatiest rib in your bowl when no one was looking. This wasn't just soup, it was winter armor in liquid form. Dziesiątplaki ziemniaczane, potato pancakes. Raw potatoes and onions were attacked with the knobby grater until knuckles bled and tears streamed. Then the whole mess was wrapped in a clean tea towel and wrung over the sink until not one drop of water dared remain. The starch settled at the bottom of the bowl was scraped back in. An egg, a spoon of flour, salt, pepper. That's it. The cast iron skillet heated until the lard shimmered and smoked. Batter dropped, by ladlefuls sizzled into golden lace. Babci flipped 10 at a time with a flick of the wrist that defied physics. Stacks grew on a plate over a pot of simmering water to stay hot. Sour cream, mushroom sauce, or, on daring days, homemade applesauce. They disappeared faster than the priest's homily. If you were the helper who grated the potatoes, you got the first crispy one straight from the pan, so hot it burned your fingers, and you didn't care one bit. 11. Fasolka po bretońsku, Breton-style beans. Navy beans soaked overnight until they swelled like tiny pillows, then baked low and slow in a clay pot with chunks of smoked kielbasa, bacon rind, onion, tomato paste from last summer's jars, sweet paprika until the whole thing turned brick red, and enough marjoram to perfume the stairwell for 3 floors. It came out of the oven bubbling like lava and thick enough to stand a spoon in. Served with crusty rye bread and the quiet satisfaction that you'd eaten like a king on peasant wages. Unexpected guests? No problem, just add another ladle and another slice of bread. Monday's leftovers were even better cold, eaten straight from the pot while doing homework. 12. Kotlet Schabowy, breaded pork cutlet. A center-cut pork loin was pounded mercilessly with the spiked tenderizer until it was thin enough to read a postcard through. Flour, beaten egg, breadcrumbs pressed on so thick it looked like the cutlet was wearing armor. Into a screaming hot pan of lard it went, emerging the size of a hubcap, golden and juicy. The crack, when you cut into it, echoed through the entire flat. Served with dill-flecked mashed potatoes and mazeria, cucumber sliced paper thin, swimming in sour cream so cold it made your teeth ache. Leftovers were fought over for cold sandwiches on Monday, preferably with a smear of mustard and a slice of raw onion. 13. Rosół, chicken broth. An old laying hen who had seen better days, carrots, parsley root, celery, a burnt onion for color, leek, allspice berries, peppercorns, and a pinch of lovage went into the biggest pot at dawn. 6 hours of gentle simmering until the flat smelled like liquid sunshine. The broth was strained until it glowed like amber in the good glasses. Hand-cut noodles so thin they were almost transparent floated in the bowl. First course every single Sunday, no exceptions. Skipping it was considered an insult to the chicken, the family, and Poland itself. Pyzy, steamed meat-filled potato dumplings. Raw potatoes grated, squeezed bone-dry in a cloth, mixed with cooked mashed potatoes and a little starch to form a dough that didn't stick. A generous ball of seasoned ground pork and onion in the center, sealed like a secret, then steamed over simmering water until they puffed up light as clouds. Served dripping with fried onions and bacon fat so hot it hissed when it hit the plate. 1 pizza was dinner, 2 guaranteed a nap on the couch with the newspaper over your face. 15. kopitka, little hoof dumplings. Yesterday's mashed potatoes got a second life with flour and egg, rolled into ropes, sliced diagonally into adorable little hooves, boiled, then pan-fried in butter until golden. Served with mushroom sauce or simply breadcrumbs toasted in butter until nut brown. The ultimate leftover makeover that somehow tasted better than the original dish. 16. Racuchy, yeasted apple fritters. Thick yeasted batter studded with apple slices dropped into hot lard, puffed up like golden pillows. Flipped once, showered with powdered sugar while still sizzling. Kids hovered like vultures, burning fingers and tongues because waiting was impossible. The smell alone dragged neighbors to the door, asking if it was someone's birthday. 17th Szarlotka, Polish apple cake. Short crust base pressed into the pan, a mountain of grated tart apples mixed with cinnamon and sugar, sometimes a lattice or crumble top, baked until the kitchen smelled like an orchard in autumn. Served still warm with a scoop of vanilla ice cream that melted into rivers. Currency stronger than money in any Polish household. 18. Compote stewed fruit drink. Dried apples, pears, plums, cherries, and a single clove simmered into sweet tart nectar. Served in jelly glasses with the rehydrated fruit at the bottom. Dessert you drank. Always on the table, always refilled, always the signal that the meal was winding down, and it was time for stories and coffee. 19. Sernik Polish cheesecake. Real farmer's twaróg pressed through a sieve until silky, beaten with eggs, sugar, vanilla, and raisins soaked in rum. Baked in a water bath until the top cracked like the surface of the moon and the center barely jiggled. Dense, creamy, lemon bright, and nothing like the watery American version. The ultimate babci flex. 20. Golonka beer-braised pork knuckle. A whole pork hock the size of a small dog, marinated overnight in dark beer, garlic, juniper, and bay leaves. Then slow roasted until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork and the skin turned mahogany crackling. Served with grated horseradish hot enough to strip paint and mustard that made grown men cry. Sunday dinner for the brave, the hungry, and the deeply Polish. So yes, every single one of these 20 dishes really did appear on Polish Sunday tables, in villages, in cities, in refugee camps, in America, in Australia, wherever a babci could light a stove and call her family home. Some were born in palaces, most were born in famine, but all were made with the same fierce love that said, "You will eat, you will live, you will remember who you are." If this video made you smell your own grandmother's kitchen through the screen, smash that like button like you're pounding cutlets. Subscribe, ring the bell, and drop a comment. Which of these would you beg your babci to make one more time, and which one would you politely push to the side of the plate? Now pour yourself another glass of compote, timekeepers, because next Sunday we're bringing back even more recipes your ancestors swore were secret. Na zdrowie!